hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
Welcome to Unscripted with Daniel, your free, independent news source for Valparaiso and Indiana politics. Hi guys, I just want to lend some additional context onto the video you're about to watch. It's part of a larger show that I'm doing. It's called Unscripted with Daniel. This particular episode is about the AHRC and how it changed to an HRC. What does that mean? And now I'm talking to Rob Cotton, the Valparaiso councilman. I'll talk to a few other councilmen, but with all that out of the way, I will go ahead and put you over to the rest of the video. You said that Costas didn't actually start the AHRC, and what do you mean by that?
Well, I guess the mayor, to some extent, has the ability to create advisory boards. Mm-hmm. However, the AHRC, which is Advisory Human Relations Council, was authorized by the city council at that time.
I see.
The city council, the mayor presented the idea, and and the city council accommodated by creating an ordinance that established the AHRC. So technically, it's his. He wanted it to be that way. And in my conversations with the council people of that time, they had no particular, they didn't have an opinion. I have no opinion about this, so they basically said, if that's what the mayor wants, that's what the mayor will get. However, what was asked for is where, we are today, with an opportunity to give that. What was asked for was an HRC, not simply an advisory board to the mayor.
I see. Is it right that after Ordinance 8, it was changed from the AHRC to just an HRC now?
A regular HRC. Which is
regular HRC.
Standard. It's generally, it's consistent with what its particular charge is, to be somewhat, I don't want to say independent, but certainly, something that has a face towards the public that it serves. It's empowered to be a resource, not only for the mayor, not only for the city council, not city leadership in general, but primarily for the residents of the city.
Yeah.
So it's to me, it's antithetical to set it up in that way. And quite frankly, we were an outlier, or I think we are an outlier with an advisory council. And I kind of confirmed that when I Googled, pluses and minuses of an advisory human relations council versus a public-facing entity. And it, in the Google search, I guess the logarithms brought us back to Valpo.
Oh.
So that's why I said, well, we must be an outlier, because the article that came up in Google talked about in certain situations, there may be an advisory relationship that ultimately converts into a full-fledged human relations council commission. I say council commission interchangeably. So, but at the time, there's a lot of history there, and for the first several years of its existence, we were fortunate to have a person who I consider, in some circles, advocate is a bad word, but he was a solid advocate for underrepresented citizens. And that was, I think, the initial chairman was Heath Carter, and so his disposition kind of made it not a big deal that it was operating as an advisory, because he was pretty forthright and public-facing in his disposition, with weekly meetings at a regular time. That was probably the hottest meeting on the docket.
And it felt independent at that point.
Well, it was still an advisory board, and it still had to be checked off by the mayor, but Heath was a very bright man. He would lead marches down to Selma, Alabama. His students would go to Selma. He has an interracial family. He was a hard person to resist with respect to his rhetorical and persuasive wit as it relates to his relationship with the mayor. So, but I'm certain that the mayor had every bit the ability to decline or to reject things that he would have brought to him. But there was a pretty good rapport there, and I think a lot of that had everything to do with how Heath Carter was drawn. He was drawn in such a way that these issues are organic to his basic sense of community and things of that sort. And it wasn't such that, he was kind of a leader in this regard, as opposed to someone who was kind of cultivated or selected on the basis of a series of interviews, finding common ground about a disposition. His disposition was firmly in the corner of the least among us, or the folks who needed a representative voice. Not to say that the current leadership isn't, but I think he was a little bit more immersed in the entire cultural aspects of what value a human resource council, relations council, means to a city like Valparaiso.
Would you say that now or in the past, it is the case that they were selecting for a certain political demeanor, or how would you describe how they selected their candidates?
I don't know how the mayor selects his candidates, but I do know that both he and the current chair indicated that the current chair was actually recommended by the city council to serve on the Valparaiso Economic Development Commission, and the mayor indicated that after several conversations, where they really got to know each other pretty well, he felt as though he'd like to have her serve as the chairperson of the Human Relations Council. I'm not certain. I think, I don't know much about the details and what goes into it, because in the bigger pond, in the bigger world of these types of entities, it would be the city council who approves even his recommendations, but we didn't engage in that way. He had full autonomy with the entire roster of appointments, and I don't think he makes all the appointments, but to some extent, I think he's given the chairman a degree of latitude in being able to recommend people who he has generally accepted. So I think what it boils down to me is that sometimes it's like be like me and I like you, or I like you, you like me, or whatever the case may be. I think that there's a certain echo chamber effect with respect to having all of the appointments coming through one person for a board that should be more diversely or more broadly selected by people who represent various constituency groups in our city. We all represent every constituency group, but certainly some of the city council members are far more, I think, in touch at the ground level. We were like the foreman in an organization. He's the chief executive officer, we're the foreman, and so we are in touch with the workers or the constituents there within our district, as a first line of communication. So in looking to come and speak with you, I had a very warm friend, a friend who was very conscientious about the city government, reach out and express to the city council his desire to have the commission stay as it is. He believed that that, let's see, where's his comments? I made a copy of his comments where he says in 2008, after multiple racial incidents in our city, the then mayor created an ad hoc committee. And now this ad hoc committee that this guy is referring to, I also served on. And we held meetings for probably a year and a half. And it was an actively, engaged ad hoc committee. So he further says, this is what the beginning of the Advisory Human Relations Council was. And he, as well as I, had the opportunity to serve on the committee from its inception until 2011, when the City Council voted to codify and formally create the Human Relations Council, or the Advisory Human Relations Council.
Right.
So initially, the idea of a Human Relations Council didn't begin with the mayor. It began with Paul Schreiner and Ivan Bodensteiner, who were both, Ivan's a civil rights attorney, constitutional lawyer, constitutional scholar, and a professor to many of the lawyers who circle all around us today. So highly regarded, highly esteemed, and highly accomplished with several books on the topics, several speaking engagements. He's an authority on civil rights. But that was the precipitating request by both Mr. Bodensteiner and Paul Schreiner in 2007 or so for the mayor to actually begin a Human Relations Council. As opposed to starting a Human Relations Council, the mayor initiated what we call that ad hoc group. And that ad hoc group had as many people who were dyed-in-the-wool advocates for civil human rights, as well as many people who felt as though that there wasn't perhaps a need for something like this. Not much different than the dialogue we see today, where we want to just kind of forget the past. We want to say that nothing to see back there. We're all equal today, and let's just go forward. But we are creating a solution to a problem that doesn't exist anymore. Right. Look, Bob, you're on the city council, but we don't want to teach our children things that are, as they say, woke. And to be quite frank, that term woke is it's kind of a dog whistle, I think, because it began in the black community, saying it's good to not just simply be around and not understand the dynamics under which many black communities and black people continue to find themselves in because of the historical underpinnings that manifest themselves even today. Many people don't want to acknowledge that the underlying history, is still who we are today, meaning in spite of however the laws may have changed and the mobility has increased, we still are largely, impacted and behave in manners that are informed by our bodies. Deeply within our survival brain, that part of us that says flight or fight, there are still these maybe subconscious, somatic, in our body, responses to each other, which means that there's still going to be instances where majorities, and particularly this whole history of white supremacy, is something that I think we are unapologetically unrepentant about anything, and we want to ignore that or actually outlaw it. They call it being woke and killing you got to kill DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Is almost like an ad hominem. It's like a bad word. But there was many people who believed that way, as there were people like Mr. Bodensteiner and Mr. Schreiner and myself, who went in dialogue and had a really vigorous and actually enjoyable time for that year and a half or so that we existed as an ad hoc group. In 2011, there had been some attrition in that group, but not the unanimous 100% majority, but a reasonable majority of people from that ad hoc group agreed that it was okay for a couple of leaders. I think I was serving as vice president of that ad hoc group at that point in time, and I think Ivan was chairing it, Ivan Bodensteiner. We were asked, or we decided at that point in time that we'd go and ask the mayor to make it official, to make a Human Relations Council official. And the best we got was an advisory Human Relations Council. I asked Paul Schreiner for a comment in anticipation. I think I did also recommend that you talk to him as well in preparation for the show. But he says that with regard to the gentleman who had written to me, I shared his correspondence. I am acquainted but do not know him well. But his interest is typical of most Americans in his and his understandable lack of insight into the plight of minority life. We don't teach history or culture effectively. And I was speaking to that with respect to actually wanting to reject things that might make our children feel bad about defining and telling us and helping inform who we are, why certain places are perpetually challenged and other places seem to be thriving. It must be something wrong with them. And so if there's something wrong with them, we don't want them around here, and we're reasonable in that assertion. But nevertheless, but returning to the issue, as I stated over the phone with me, he said our national rhetoric that all are equal and all are welcome is not a reality. People of color, of accented English or no English at all, without the trappings of middle-classness, feel their lack of belonging and are rarely embraced by the decision makers as important unless they have money. So the Indian doctors and the Asians and sometimes the well-to-do Jews, he didn't put Jews, I put them in there because, I think they've actually morphed into being considered honorary whites. And a lot of that has to do with the status and the girth, of their political and economic wealth. But the rest struggle for a zillion reasons, he said. The rest outside of that crew suffer for a zillion reasons. He says also Project Neighbors and its predecessor, which was called the Valparaiso Lutheran Builders Association, of which my family was associated with. In fact, that was the small group of folks that had befriended my mother and introduced us to Valparaiso. But in a few relationships that would follow the second generation to transition, I'm not certain what that means, but he says the cultural and financial obstacles to full participation are difficult for old white guys to understand. I don't have a full grasp, but have been fortunate to bump into a few people and experiences which have given me some insight. Guys like Larry Bass understands this, and there are others. But the quickest route to create understanding on the HRC is to appoint people who have lived it. That's what you can do with this legislation. So pack the HRC with folks that have minority life experience or who have not whitewashed their sense of self. Good luck. That was from him. That was sort of as a counter or a rebuttal to what I shared from the other gentleman, who was a very wonderful guy as well. I love that gentleman. I don't want to mention his name, but
saying that it was too woke.
He didn't necessarily say it was too woke. He basically said that that the mayor deserves to have his own advisory commission, being the HRC. And quite frankly, because the mayor's point is that as the executive, his responsibilities are different than the city council's, and that he has to oversee 400 employees, and that it's important for him to be aware of incidents and creative ways to deal with that. And so, but that sounds limited to the population of city employees, as opposed to where this should be focused. Not to the exclusion of city employees, but it should be public facing. That's a term that says, the ironic thing is that the mayor wouldn't lose one iota of his ability to be informed or advised by having a structure that is more broadly facing the public. And nor would the city council be rebuffed when we make inquiries with the Human Relations Council that they perhaps aren't accountable to answer questions to the city council. It's like, well, that I think that bothered a few council members, is that we are here by the pleasure of the mayor, and so we'll defer to what conversations we have with him. I don't think that settled well with some people, but my sense of this whole thing is that it was hijacked initially by the mayor, and in a way that would kind of, what would you call it, suppress things, as opposed to allow the truest and most honest, diverse range of dialogue and ideas and creativity from the lived experience that Mr. Schreiner indicated to come forth, So, quite frankly, but anyway, my opinion is that under the administration, who is this? Okay, so, this is another gentleman. He says, I'm in favor of passing, this is another one of the original thinkers on this. I'm in favor of passing the proposed ordinance as written. Initially, the HRC was proposed to be public-facing and to inform the public and elected officials, that's all of us, about issues of racism, discrimination, and human rights concerns and violations. At the time, the mayor wanted it to be under his control as an advisory council to himself, as an advisory HRC to the mayor. The changes in this new proposal, and he's referring to the city council's desire to go on and make this a full-fledged HRC. The the changes in this new proposal strengthen the role of the HRC in that it is not dependent on one person, the mayor, to make all of the appointments, but it reports to all the city elected officials, the council, and the mayor. Quite frankly, my opinion is that under the last administration, it did not function very well at all. And he's honest about that. In fact, it had been suppressed into meaningless. It wasn't really, it was not an entity. And that bothered me. That bothered me deeply. And that bothered me deeply because I'm not trying to say that we're looking for problems that don't exist, but if there was one problem with this type of an issue, and particularly in light of our longer term history, and with respect to the more cosmopolitan flavor that we'd like to project, I think that there should be this type of entity, whether there's one or whether there's 50 incidents of these types of affronts. But he further says, this will not be the case when both the mayor and the council appoint members. And I think you can understand that for clear reasons.
Right.
And I'm not certain why the mayor just wouldn't be agreeable to that. To me, it sounds so much more efficient, so much more functional and effective.
Isn't there a bit of politics going on here too? I mean, if we look at the official Republican statement on the Valparaiso Valparaiso Republicans Facebook, they talk about how there was this one thing that the HRC was trying to fund that was a trans woman reading in our Valparaiso library. So it seems, at least on their Valparaiso Republicans page, that they're making it seem like it's a very political change, that they fear that it's just a way for the left or Democrats to get their way in the HRC. And how do we prevent or address the concerns by some residents and city officials regarding the potential for politicization of the council? And what do you say to that? Is it politicization?
Well, you just talked about who's politicizing it, because we aren't. I mean, if a trans person is offended, I mean, there are people walking around talking about all kind of stuff, like there's some really gross, what do you call it? Protestations against that entire community. It is one of those things that that I think certain colleges have been fined because of their being too woke or because of their DEI programs, and I think the governor has kept trying to kill everything that has anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to say that the Democrats or the left is being political, I think is disingenuous, because what we're trying to do is simply protect the rights and dignities of every single resident, regardless of their persuasion, sexual orientation, any of the circumstances that say that they should not be discriminated against, and that these are the groups that sometimes are. So, or oftentimes are, I should say, not sometimes, but if there are incidences of discrimination, it's usually against an underrepresented class of folks. So that's not political. That's ethical. That's moral. That's what an HRC does. It's so if in fact somebody who happens to be gay or trans or something along those lines, is petitioning the HRC for support, for outreach, or for some type of an event, that's one of the things that is in the context of what the HRC does. But because of certain people's political disposition against this, that's where it becomes political. It's not political to reach out or to establish an entity that's designed to have everybody included in the democratic process without discrimination. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, people always want to equivocate.
Right.
They say, "Oh, they're making it." Well, wait a minute, guys. No, this is not political with me. This is simply about human rights. Human
they're
rights.
just being who they feel they are, and that's the end of it. And so, if they're being discriminated against, they have to tell what's happening to themselves. And the Human Rights Council is supposed to address those issues. It's not political, it's just addressing what's happened to them, and they belong to whatever group, right?
Yeah, but then to blame, to assert that this is a political move on the part of the Democrats is just ridiculous. I think it's it's an insult too. It's not an insult to the Democrats. It's an insult to whoever's making that assertion, as far as I'm concerned. Because it's incredible that the simple Christ-like action of including everybody would be deemed as political, and again, but that is the reverse logic of saying for someone to say that is in fact the gaslighter who is being political, gaslighting the public to say someone else is. So anyway, I don't even pay attention to that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what was on the Republican page. However, I guess I'm a frequent flyer on the Republican page, and I'm flattered by that.
What do you think? Are you hopeful about the AHRC or the HRC going forward? Do you think there will be improved results for our diverse community?
Well, I think the platform will actually, it lends itself to having a better opportunity to fulfill its mission and purpose. I don't know that in and of itself will. However, I am a big fan of making good process in government and making certain that in the context of that good process, that inclusion and accessibility, and most importantly, every voice counts. Every voice should count and not feel marginalized, or that they don't have a platform to air grievances on circumstances related to basic participation and inclusion in the Valparaiso fabric, in the fabric of Valparaiso. When I looked at this thing here, it says, I looked up what an advisory board versus a public-facing Human Relations Commission and the key differences. So maybe we can discern some of the ways that it could perhaps be different under one structure versus the other. So it says the distinction between an advisory Human Relations Commission serving a mayor and a public-facing Human Relations Commission lies primarily in their powers, responsibilities, and relationship to the broader community. Now, this is an AI-generated overview, so it may need to be edified, but it says, 1, advisory Human Relations Commissions to the mayor. A primary role is to provide counsel and assistance directly to the mayor on matters related to human relations within the city. The focus is advising the mayor on the status of human relations, identifying needs and opportunities, acting as a resource during incidents, and suggesting and promoting events for improved human relations. So, first of all, one way we can discern that it will be improved is that being able to identify circumstances as opposed to waiting for them to become incidences is much stronger when you have a broader array of people who perhaps have an organic lived experience associated with these issues. You see what I'm saying? I mean, if you're a kind of a deck that's been stacked up with rapport with one person and accountability to one person, it's not as likely that there will be a broad enough reach in the experiences and the relationships that might come from having a broader range of appointments, to appointers.
Yeah.
So the structure And again, we could actually, as opposed to waiting for incidences, perhaps be more creative in ways to support and mitigate the actual evolution, the education, the information, all of the different things that seem to be somewhat controlled and or inhibited by the sense of what the mayor wants to make this, and that's, just notify me of incidents and circumstances when they occur, as opposed to let's be on the prowl, not on the prowl like we're looking for a skeleton under every rock, but that, we just have our finger on the pulse of this particular subject line. The structure of an advisory is often appointed by and reporting directly to the mayor. Well, what good does that do for the public in general? So my city, my people, there are so many more people who call me before they call the mayor that it's not funny. So, but at the same time, we are all public servants and we all serve everyone. And potentially in that, it's potentially lacking of independent formal inclusion by the city budget structure. And again, that's one of the rubs right now, is that whereas there was a bit of a stipend associated with the AHRC, and they were given some autonomy to create programs and have a grant program, I think was what was in question. That's an odd set of circumstances, because I can't imagine, and I haven't gotten a good answer for it, that the mayor wasn't aware that the HRC would be engaging in various, issuing various grants. It's just that the WHO was the recipient of this grant, perhaps upset a base of people who didn't think that a grant should go to the gay, LGBT gay thing. So anyway, so an example. It says, this is in AI Overview. In AI Overview, it says, as an example, Valparaiso, Indiana has an advisory human relations council established by the mayor to serve in these advisory functions. So now we look at the definition that AI gives us for a public-facing human relations commission. And the primary role is to engage directly with the public, address human relations issues, and potentially enforce anti-discrimination ordinances. Our enforcement agency or entity is established through the Human Rights Ordinance, which has what's called an Investigations and Reconciliations Commission. But the Human Relations Council, is linked into making certain that what's in the Human Rights Ordinance, has a means of being enforced and or, finding reconciliation. That's our primary objective. But the focus may include actively addressing conflicts, discrimination, or injustice, fostering community building and civic engagement, and facilitating communication between diverse populations. I'm not certain that goes on right now, but that is certainly how you prevent, how you create a culture that is a far more familiar and engaged and, understanding of everyone, in relationships within the community. A Human Relations Commission established by ordinance, as found in some cities, may be responsible for administering anti-discrimination ordinances and adjudicating complaints arising from them. In essence, an advisory commission serves as a sounding board and a resource for the mayor, offering advice and insights without necessarily holding any direct public authority. In contrast, a public-facing commission may possess broader responsibilities, including engaging directly with citizens, potentially handling complaints, and advocating for human relations initiatives within the community. Advocating for human relations initiatives within the community. Well, as long as it doesn't benefit that group, because that group upsets Mike Braun or any number of these other guys who are running around, with this gaslight expression, don't be woke, and DEI is like bad, but that's not what Jesus Christ would say. And of course, I think that the mayor understands that, being an ordained minister. So I think it's more a sensitivity to his base, the electorate, because as an elected official, you have to be somewhat sensitive about disturbing in this machination of our public, the MAGA base. So
True.
Anyway, so I feel for him, but that's not going to stop us from doing right by the broader public here in Valparaiso. This city council is really oriented towards reforming some of the ways that too often this city had been controlled by a narrow loop of the same names that circulated between every point of power within our city, and I've been really outspoken about the need for a more inclusive and accessible government, so that we can have authentic representation of everyone, and of course, every voice counts. Right. I like having opportunities to say that, Dan. That is my slogan, right?
Thanks for joining me on Unscripted with Daniel. And if you're watching on WVOP, be sure to tell a friend about this great broadcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, then subscribe and like this video. Thanks so much. See you next time.